We say, and I'll tell you what, those of us who have experienced war, we hate war. So the best thing about a war is ending it as quickly as possible. And if you're going to have one, I want to be there. I want to be there to make sure it's done right and to make sure it's done quickly. But we're not naturally violent. If we were violent, we wouldn't be very good at our jobs. Because we have to be able to depend on each other. And if someone's going to go off half-cocked all the time, we can't depend on that person. I'm just going to check my time here. Okay, good. We're not intolerant or bullyish. That's another misconception. I know we made a big fuss about don't ask, don't tell over the past few years. But the fact of the matter is gays and lesbians have been serving in the military for years. And for the most part, maybe not folks at my level, but the folks who actually work with them, they know who they are. And they don't care. Now, some guys my age, maybe 40 and older, maybe have some heartburn with this. But the young people were raised in the same schools as young people in the civilian world. They're taught tolerance. They're taught to treat each other with integrity and to care for each other. And it's the same thing. Now, do we tell homophobic jokes? Oh, yeah. And do we tell black jokes? Yep. And do we tell white jokes? Yep. Do we tell Italian? I'm half Italian. Do we tell Italian jokes? Yes. That's part of the culture where we go back and forth to see how we operate under stress. But the fact of the matter is, if the person on my right and the person on my left does their job, we all get to go home. And at the end of the day, that's all I care about. I want to go home and I want my buddies to go home. That's it. And I want to be safe. And so if you're doing your job, I don't care. And we're not bullyish. Matter of fact, a lot of military people were bullied when they were younger, and they wanted to find a way of overcoming that and going after that. We love killing bullies. If we have to, that's a good mission. And stupid. I've already touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to go into more specifics. Just this past June, we had a graduation of all our high school kids across the country. Do you know that 72% of them would not be eligible for military service? 72%. They can't pass the entrance exam. They didn't get good enough grades in school. They have a GED. We don't take GEDs anymore, unless you have some subsequent college. You know, the old days they said you either got to go to the jail or go to the Army. Nah, that doesn't happen anymore. You have to have that. Height and weight requirements, previous drug use, criminality. All of these things exclude about 72%. And from that remaining 28%, we have to find the few that actually want to do this because we're all volunteers. And that's the person who joins the military. So even if they get out after 6 years, you've already got somebody who's already cleared all those hurdles. Okay? So, oh, and like I said, we don't take GEDs anymore. Our folks are pretty darn smart. The infantry is one of the lowest ASVAB scores. That's our entrance exam. It's kind of like the SATs for the military. The infantry is one of the lower ones that you can qualify for. Their manual that they have to learn is about that thick. And they have to know it, because their drill sergeant's going to be yelling at them in the face and wants to know what's on page 372. That's how detailed we get. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to kind of blow through this. This is just if you know that if you are in the Marine Corps, it's oorah or In the Army, we say hua. This is what it means. There you go, next slide. It means all that, and that, and that. So it can mean almost anything. So if someone says hua, they're just basically agreeing with you, okay? Just so you know. Now don't try to use some of this language, because we'll know that you're a faker right off the bat. We can tell who they are right away. We use a lot of metaphorical language, and this is a small grab bag of it. But we use a lot of metaphorical language. My six, that's how we describe when we're going into an enemy area. We identify where people are. 12, think of a face of a clock. 12 is ahead of me, 3 is to my right, 9 is to my left. My 6 is back here. Where am I most vulnerable? Back here. So when we go into a fight, we always make sure that we have one person who's facing the back. And we put a lot of trust in that person, because that person is making sure that our most vulnerable spot is cared for. When it becomes metaphorical is when we get out of the military, we talk about somebody whom we trust. That's somebody who's got my 6. It's one of the best compliments we can make to you. Hey, if you got my 6, and I tell her, hey, you can trust her, she's got my 6, then that means you can trust her too. Stay in your own lane. Sounds like a driving thing, doesn't it? It's actually, when we go to the range and we learn how to fire our weapons, you each have a lane, and your target is at the end of the lane. And young people sometimes, as they're aiming, and there's like 30 of us all lined up, and sometimes that young person who is aiming down his lane gets nervous, and the weapon finds somebody else's target. And we all both have 20 rounds. This guy has 40 hits, and I've got 0, and we figure that he was shooting at the wrong target. So just before they say commence firing, they always say this thing, stay in your own lane. It becomes metaphorical. It becomes, when we get out, it means you're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. So if you're asking questions that are too personal and I don't feel like answering them right now, I might say stay in your own lane. Stay in your own lane. You're my boss. You know, what's happening with my kids has nothing to do with you. So stay in your own lane. That's what you might hear. All laid up. That's what we call equipment and machinery that's all rusted out and beat up and the whole thing, and it's old. But sometimes we use that to refer to our lives. And what it can mean is that maybe I just lost a spouse, maybe I just lost a job, maybe my boyfriend or my girlfriend broke up with me. Whatever it might be, my life is all laid up. And that's all it means. It means that I'm not in a good place. Tracking. That's an interesting one. If you ever seen the mud that we have to drive through sometimes, what you find out pretty quickly is that if you put your tires in the person's track ahead of you, you can move along that much faster, and you still end up in the same place. So if we're tracking, metaphorically, it means that we're both going to end up in the same place because I'm following where you're leading me. So we're tracking. Okay, I get it. Are you tracking me? Hua. At ease. I'll tell you this one just because it gives you an idea of how ingrained this is. I actually got this from one of my students when we were teaching this course at the University of New England. She said that she was on a ward where there was a Vietnam vet who went into a delirium. And he was flashing, throwing his arms around the whole bit, and they were trying to sedate him. They were trying to get a needle in his arm, and they couldn't do it. They had orderlies holding his arms, and they couldn't hold him down. But then a nurse, who had also been in Vietnam, came into the room. In the Army, we have, we stand at attention. Then there's also a position called at ease. That would be this one right here. But it's also a term that we use to tell people to shut up because we're about to start the show. So if you guys had been all talking like this and you've been military people and you were all talking to your neighbors, I might go, at ease! And then you would all be quiet immediately. This nurse, who had the military experience, yelled at that guy in the delirium, at ease! And he froze. And they were able to put the needle in his arm and sedate him. That's how deeply ingrained this stuff is. That's why I tell you it. Because this is not just something that we play at. This is not just Monopoly or something like that. This is something that is ingrained in who we are. And I think it's what we bring to it too. Like I said, we're all volunteers, so we kind of bring our own version of this to the military. And we really believe it. I know it's weird in this world to have someone say that we actually believe stuff, but we do. We really do. So next slide. We do use the phonetic code very often. Lima Charlie, loud and clear. LC, loud and clear. Charlie Foxtrot. Well, Charlie means cluster. Foxtrot stands for F. But you will hear, by the way, we do use bad language. It is part of our culture. And we drop F-bombs. You need to understand, as an employer, you just need to tell the military member that that's not appropriate for your workplace. And we'll listen. You're not insulting anybody. We just don't realize we're doing it because we're so used to doing it. So absolutely say to that person, hey, that's not appropriate for this workspace. And they'll get it. They might mess up once or twice after that, but they'll understand it, and they'll understand why they're doing it, because above all, we are loyal to our company. We are loyal to our orders. FUBAR, college people use this a lot. It's that same F thing. I'll just say fouled. Fouled up beyond all recognition. And the last one, I bet you you've gone into a snafu once or twice. And you might have even said snafu. Well, that shows both our cynicism and how old this is, because this came from World War II. And the cynicism is, that stands for situation normal, all fouled up. Okay? So if you've ever said snafu, you've cursed. Okay? Just remember that. All right, next slide. All right. This is kind of like, we'll bring it home, and then I'll give you to Carrie, and Carrie will talk to you a little bit about some of the behavioral health stuff that you might have heard about, and what are the facts. You know, we always say, oh gosh, maybe we shouldn't tell them this. No, we want to tell you the truth. We want to be upfront about it. And Carrie will tell you the statistics, and you'll see the point why we actually want her up here, because we're not trying to hide anything. We want to tell the absolute truth. I've hit on this number several times. Proven leadership. Person who goes up in the ranks, that's somebody who knows how to be a leader day one. Next slide. You give us a mission, we will get it carried out. We will stay after hours. Very often you'll have to tell a military person to go home because they want to stay there, because we're used to it. I got a kick out of it. I heard when I was in Afghanistan, we would get up around maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and we would go do our physical fitness. We'd eat breakfast. We'd go to a meeting. We'd do our mission for the day, have lunch, do our rest of the mission, have dinner, maybe have another meeting, and then we would work until about 9, 10 o'clock at night. And so we get a real kick out of people. When we came home, I had a person who filled in for me, and he was kind of reading me up on all the stuff that we had been doing. And we're supposed to get done around 3:30 or 4 o'clock up on Camp Keys. And we were sitting there, and he was continually being, because he's less ranked than I am. And so he was telling me all this stuff, and I'm sitting there, yeah, okay, and I'm writing it down, yeah, okay. And he goes, sir, I think we should go. I'm like, well, why? Well, usually I go home at 4. Well, what time is it? It's 7. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. But you didn't notice, because you become so mission focused that you don't even realize what time it is. I actually write in my planner, my daily planner, I write eat lunch, because sometimes I forget. Team players, absolutely. We already talked about selfless service. The team winning is more important than me looking good. Next. I just talked about the work ethic. Not much more need be said. Our training is right at the top level of anything that you're ever going to see. I forget who the speaker was. Maybe it might have been the governor. He said that, why don't we just hand the person a commercial driver's license? Because if you can do all that crap while the people are shooting at you, how much easier is it going to be out on 95? He's absolutely right. And our training is excellent, because not only do you get the actual technical training on the most modern stuff, but you also get somebody who's learned leadership and learned being part of a team, et cetera, and so forth. So yeah, our training and education is absolutely on par with anything it's actually better than most of the things you're going to find in the civilian world. Next slide. Immediate contributor. This person that you're interviewing for the job may not know right now exactly what the job entails. It may be different because you do it differently in the civilian world. That person's going to know it by day 3. They know how to do it immediately because they know how to learn. And they will go home and they will study what they're supposed to do because they are mission focused. And so they want to be part of the team and contribute right away. Sometimes you got to rein them in. I had one of our former generals said, I have 2 kinds of officers, the ones I have to do this and the ones that I have to rein in. He said, I'll always take the ones I got to rein in. And that's what makes up most of us. Next. Oh yeah, background checks and security clearance. Top secret. Secret. That means they've already been vetted through all sorts of different organizations. That means that they've been fingerprinted. That means you've got a person who does not have a criminal background because they're not allowed in the military anymore. If they do have too many OUIs or whatever, we kick them out. They have a dishonorable discharge, important term for you to know, and understand that that person did not meet our standards. So if they have an honorable discharge and they've gone through, it doesn't matter if they spent 6 years in or 20 years in, you've got somebody who's already been cleared when you're, okay, at least at one point in their life they were cleared, So next slide. This is not as important to you, but it could be if you hire somebody from another state. The government will, as they are transitioning out, the government will pay for them to come to this state and pay for all their household goods to come to this state. Doesn't apply to the Guard and Reserve, but the active duty folks as they're transitioning. There are tax credits. You heard Mr. LePage mention one of them this morning where to tell you the truth, that was the first time I ever heard of it. I did not know that we had that, and that's pretty darn cool, where if your company pays back the student loans of a military member, the state will reimburse you as a tax credit, $1 for $1. That's pretty darn good. And there's some other ones. This is a new one, the CRI, or was new a year ago anyway. And you can actually get money for hiring a veteran from the federal government. And there's a whole process which I'm not terribly familiar with, so I'm not going to tell you something that might be wrong. But there is a process by which you can do this. And then I think that was the last one, but okay. These are numbers. Right now, serving right now currently in Maine are roughly 7,100 folks, plus their families. And that's kind of the breakdown. Some of them are part-time. The Navy guys and gals and the Coast Guard guys and gals are active. So they're not looking for a job necessarily, but they might be looking for a job to transition to because Maine's so beautiful and they want to retire here. All right, next. 1.3 million Mainers. 135,000 of us served at some point. We're the highest percentage. Alaska beats us out sometimes, but that's because there's only like 14 people who live in Alaska. So we're pretty much a lot of people have made the joke that we're essentially a southern state that got stuck in the Northeast because we like pickup trucks and country music and our military. And you don't get that necessarily. I don't want to offend anybody. Massachusetts? Anyone from Massachusetts? Oh, thank God. Only less than half are, only 1/3 are eligible for VA benefits. Only 1/3. So they are looking for a job and they are looking for supports. And I think I'm going to probably just blow through the. Oh yeah, if you need any resources, if you do have a question about your veteran, if you do have a question about getting resources for him, and I'm sorry, I've really tried to change the color of this and I can't. It won't let me in the PowerPoint, and I'm probably just reflecting how little I know about PowerPoint. But this is a newly revamped website, www.maine.gov/veterans. That is our resource guide. It is excellent. There's another organization you can go to, the Maine Military and Community Network. They have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day a week. You will get a recording after 8 p.m., but they will call you back. Then they can point you towards those resources and help you through. And yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Real quickly, and I think, oh, I just made it.
Well, thank you, everybody. First, before I get started, I'm going to kind of throw some, before I get to the facts and statistics of things, what are some common misconceptions or some common stereotypes that are out there about veterans? What do you hear? Typical things, typical responses. Yes? PTSD. Yes, they have PTSD, for sure. What else? Yeah? That they have a difficult time for that, transitioning back. Okay, yeah, definitely. Any other ones? Yes.
They all think they're chiefs or drill sergeants.
Yes, they're all chiefs and drill sergeants, absolutely. Okay. Say it again? That they're warmongers, right. They're thirsty for war, absolutely. Good ones. Okay. So those are the common misconceptions or the common stereotypes. And maybe, you know, in some cases, in some very rare cases, some individuals may fit that. But in general, most veterans don't. And we'll go over why they don't. So go ahead. So here's some statistics for you guys. Just some general information. Over 40% of all troops deployed to OEF, do you guys know what that stands for? Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, are from the National Guard and the Reserve. Over 40%. Okay, so a lot of our troops came from the Guard or came from the Reserves. We had to rely on them a lot when we went to war. 18%, about 18% of returning troops meet the criteria for PTSD. Okay, so that conception is most veterans have PTSD. It's actually not true. There's about 18% may meet the criteria. Okay, most veterans don't. Roughly 20% might meet the criteria of a traumatic brain injury, okay, because lots of stuff flies and goes on around there, and they get bonked on the head one way or another, or they get their head jarred. About 7% report a mental health problem. Okay, so not many people actually, not many veterans report that they have a mental health problem. And we'll get into some of the reasons why they do that. And about half of those that may need treatment actually seek it. And then about half of those individuals get adequate treatment. Okay, and that could be one of our biggest challenges in Maine is location, right? If you're in more of in the rural areas, it's really hard to get the treatment that you need. Okay, so thankfully, insurances are catching on, local agencies are catching on, they're offering telehealth services and things like that, you know, relying on technology more to help provide those services so that the soldier or the veteran doesn't have to drive 3 hours one way just to get to their appointment. All right, so that's one of the challenges. The other challenges as clinicians is that we are trained and qualified in the types of therapy that work really well for military. And that's happening more and more too, but you know, it's a lot of catching up that we got to do, especially in the state of Maine. As Andy said, you know, we're one of the highest percentage of veterans as far as other states, so go ahead. Combat and operational stress, I don't want to get into this too much. It's just more of a definition that we use, and we kind of determine, okay, when they come back, you know, the length of exposure, the severity of it, any history of previous mental health conditions, things like that. Those are the things we kind of assess when soldiers come back from deployment, just to see where their kind of range of stress-related injury is what we call it. You know, whether it's a physical injury or mental health injury, you know, that's what we look at. Go ahead. Our challenge as clinicians is to determine what's considered normal and adaptive. Like someone said, you know, what's the adjustment period of coming back? Because every soldier will go through an adjustment period, absolutely. So what's considered kind of normal and adaptive, and what's considered pathological? Sometimes there's a fine line. We don't always have that answer. There is no black and white answer to that. And sometimes that's frustrating to soldiers because they like